My brother clinked a spoon against his champagne flute, and the sound cut through the crowded ballroom of the country club like a bell. 400 faces swung toward him as he flashed that rehearsed, magnetic grin of his. My little sister put in 20 years with the Air Force, he told the crowd through the microphone, his tone soaked in mocking amusement. Never once got off the ground, though. 2 decades of shuffling paperwork while actual men were up there flying. Soft laughter rolled across the room. Over at table 31, tucked beside the swinging kitchen doors, my family offered up nervous half-smiles. I stayed upright, calm, sipping my water without a word. But before Mark could launch into his next jab, the tall wooden doors at the rear of the hall swung open with a heavy click. A 3-star general strode in, uninvited and unexpected, medals catching the light. The instant his gaze found mine, every voice in that ballroom went silent. My name is Margaret Sutton, Maggie to the people back home. At 42, I'd grown accustomed to being the sister nobody noticed. The chandeliers above Oak Ridge Country Club spilled golden light across 400 well-dressed guests. The whole town had turned out for what the local paper was already calling the event of the season. A lavish welcome home party thrown for my brother Mark. At 39, Mark was charming, confident, and a senior captain flying for a major airline. In the eyes of our town, he was practically royalty, the hometown hero who'd made it to the skies and put our small community on the map. His photo was plastered on banners near the entrance, and guests had spent the whole night queuing up just to shake his hand and hear another one of his polished flying stories. And then there was me. While Mark soaked up attention at the head table beside the mayor, my family had steered me quietly to table 31, wedged right against the kitchen's swinging doors. Every time a server pushed through with a tray of food, a blast of cold air hit the back of my neck. All evening, my parents had been making excuses for my plain navy blue dress and my 2 decades in uniform, murmuring to guests that I'd basically worked a low-key desk job in the Air Force. Since the real nature of my work had been sealed under strict federal classification, I had no way to set the record straight. I couldn't say what I'd actually done, so I sat there at table 31, sipping ice water, spine straight, bracing myself for a night of being the family's disappointment. Growing up, Mark had always known exactly how to own a room. While I stayed quiet and focused on discipline, he mastered charisma. When I signed up for the Air Force straight out of college, our parents were baffled. They couldn't grasp why their daughter wanted to vanish into a uniform, especially with Mark already breezing through flight school, posting polished photos in his pilot's cap. For the next 20 years, on the rare occasions I made it home on leave, the same scene repeated itself. "Still behind that desk out in Texas, Maggie?" my dad would ask, sliding me the salad without so much as a glance. All I could do was smile politely and answer, "Yes, Dad." Confidentiality agreements kept me silent. I couldn't tell them about the nights I never slept, the danger zones I operated in, or the weight of holding other people's lives in my hands. To them, Mark was up among the clouds while I was buried in paperwork. That imbalance came to a head tonight. Mark rose at the head table and tapped his glass until the room quieted. He adjusted the microphone with practiced confidence, scanning the 400 neighbors and local officials before him. "Thank you all so much for coming tonight," he began, his voice smooth over the speakers. "It means everything to serve as a pilot and represent this community." The room applauded warmly. And then his eyes drifted straight to table 31. His smile stretched wider, taking on that familiar, cutting edge. "My sister Maggie, everyone, 20 years in the Air Force," he announced. "But she never left the ground once. 20 years, and all she's got to show for it is a stack of paperwork, while the real pilots did the heavy lifting." Cruel laughter swept through the ballroom. My brother had just turned my entire career into a joke. He let the laughter linger, leaning against the podium, savoring it, while our parents chuckled along at the head table. I kept my head level and my gaze forward, refusing to hand him the reaction he wanted. Then, out of nowhere, a heavy thud echoed from the back of the hall. The double doors swung open. Cold air rushed through the warm room, carrying with it the crisp sound of polished boots striking marble. The laughter cut off instantly, replaced by confused stillness spreading through all 400 guests. A man in a flawless Air Force dress uniform stepped through the doorway. 3 silver stars gleamed on his shoulders, catching the chandelier light. Rows of ribbons and silver oak leaves lined his chest, marking decades of combat leadership. 2 armed escorts flanked him, standing rigid. It was General Vance. Mark froze mid-sentence, his confidence cracking as he stared down the aisle. The mayor shot to his feet, scanning the room for an event coordinator who might explain an unannounced military officer's arrival. Mark forced a nervous laugh into the mic. "Well," he said, "looks like we've got a special guest joining us." General Vance ignored the mayor's flustered welcome and Mark's shaky greeting entirely. His boot struck the floor with deliberate precision as he moved past the white-draped tables, past the dignitaries, straight up onto the stage. Mark stepped aside, offering the microphone with a stiff, polite nod. The general took it without a word, his sharp blue eyes sweeping across the stunned, silent crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vance's voice thundered through the speakers, filling every corner of the room with authority. "Forgive the interruption, but I was told a particular person was here tonight, and I couldn't let this evening pass without settling a debt of honor." The crowd leaned in. Mark straightened his tie, a proud little smile creeping back, apparently certain the general had come to hand him some surprise honor. "A decade ago," Vance continued, his voice dropping low and serious, "a joint special ops unit got caught behind enemy lines in a violent dust storm. Surrounded, taking fire, 32 men were staring down certain death. Command had already written off the rescue as impossible." He paused, letting it land. "Except for one commander," Vance said, his words like steel. "Working under top-secret clearance from an underground flight command post, one officer took charge of the entire rescue mission. She flew them through the storm, directed air cover, and personally brought all 32 men home alive. Her call sign was Halo 6. For 10 years, the general went on, his voice carrying to the rafters, that mission, and the identity of the officer who led it, stayed buried under the highest level of government classification. But as of 0800 this morning, those files were officially declassified." He set the microphone down, stepped away from the podium, and walked slowly to the edge of the stage. He wasn't looking at Mark. He wasn't looking at the mayor. His eyes were fixed on the far corner of the room. The crowd went still as he descended the steps and began walking straight and unhurried, past the head tables, past the news cameras, all the way to table 31 by the kitchen doors. My parents turned in their seats, faces draining of color. Mark stood frozen on the stage, microphone dangling forgotten in his hand. General Vance stopped 2 feet from my chair, snapped his heels together with a crack that echoed through the silence, and raised a sharp, textbook salute. "Captain Margaret Sutton," he announced, loud enough for all 400 guests to hear, "on behalf of the Department of Defense, the President of the United States, and the 32 men who made it home because of you, I salute you, Halo 6. I rose slowly, smoothed my plain navy dress, and returned the salute with perfect form. Gasps rippled through the room. My father's mouth fell open. Mark's face went white as the truth settled over him. I hadn't spent 20 years behind a desk. I was a legend nobody knew about. General Vance held his salute a moment longer, then reached into his coat and produced a velvet case. For 10 years, he told the crowd, Captain Sutton was legally barred from saying a single word about her service. While others were bragging about commercial routes and calm skies, she carried the burden of covert combat command in total silence. He opened the case to reveal a silver star, the nation's third highest combat honor, resting beside a distinguished flying cross. My father looked stunned. My mother gripped her necklace, eyes darting between me and the medals glinting in the general's hands. Captain Sutton wasn't pushing paper, Vance continued, his tone hardening. She led elite strike teams, ran covert extraction operations, and saved lives under conditions most pilots in this room could never imagine. He cast a cold, pointed look toward the stage, where Mark still stood rooted in place, his arrogant smile shattered, his knuckles white against the podium. The same 400 guests who'd been laughing at his jokes minutes earlier now stared at him with open disdain. Real heroes, General Vance said, stepping forward to pin the medal to my dress. Don't need a microphone to prove what they're worth. Their actions do the talking. The ballroom broke into a thunderous standing ovation. The mayor, the council members, total strangers, all on their feet, cheering, while my brother stood slant and defeated in the shadow of the sister he'd tried to humiliate. As the applause faded, the general shook my hand, gave a final respectful nod, and left the room just as quietly as he'd entered it. I glanced up at the stage. Mark was still standing there, smaller than I'd ever seen him. The smug confidence he'd worn my entire life had drained away, replaced by pure shame. My parents sat frozen, unable to look at me, realizing all at once the mistake they'd made in dismissing me for 20 years. I didn't walk up to gloat. I didn't need to. Real strength never needs an audience, and true honor doesn't ask to be witnessed. I simply adjusted the medal now pinned to my dress, picked up my bag from table 31, and walked out of Oak Ridge Country Club with my head high, leaving them all behind to sit with the truth. Looking back now, those 20 quiet years taught me something simple. Your value is never decided by people who never bothered to know your real story. You don't owe proof to anyone determined to misjudge you. Given enough time, the truth and your own integrity will always speak louder than words ever could. So tell me, if you were sitting at that table, what would you have done? Would you have stayed silent or called it out sooner? Drop your thoughts below and let me know what city you're watching from so I can see just how far this story traveled. Thanks for sticking with me until the end.